Hello and welcome back to my Stitch and Addiction channel for my next YouTube video. This is the next video in the series on patterning. I actually have gone out of order from what I originally planned because life has been really busy and I have not been able to get some of the other videos completed. However, I am in the process of making this costume for my niece. Her birthday is coming up and I have a surprise plan for her. And so I wanted to go ahead and do this video now while I'm making this dress. This video is on how to pattern historically accurate Disney princess costumes. And I use historically accurate a little bit loosely, but the reason I'm using that term is because I'm using photos of period dresses from when the fairy tale was written, as opposed to using photos from movies of how movie costumers have decided to pattern the dresses for the characters. So this specific video is on Belle from Beauty and the Beast and her yellow ball gown. I am going to stick with the yellow color with the red roses, but I'm going to go with a pattern that's closer to what would have been worn possibly in the time frame that Beauty and the Beast was written. So Beauty and the Beast was written in French in the 1740s. So I looked at some 1740s dresses and read about French 1740s fashion. When researching, I paid special attention to the silhouette and then also the things that I've talked about previously in my pattern hacking video about paying attention to what is the bodice like, what are the sleeves like, what is the skirt like, what is the neckline like. If you want more details on that, go back and look at my pattern hacking video. I also want to make a disclaimer and say I am not a fashion historian and I am not doing this to create an exact replica of a 1740s dress. I'm doing this to create something that's relatively close to the silhouette of a 1740s dress without being exact. I'm using polyester fabrics, so I'm not being accurate with my fabrics, but I just wanted the general silhouette to look very similar to the 1740s. So there was a couple of things that I noticed. First off, the neckline was usually a square neckline. Sometimes they had a very wide open round necklines that came to the shoulders, kind of like the ball gowns of the 1860s. But my niece is only 4 and her shoulders are smaller, so I'm thinking the square neckline is going to be a little bit better bet because it's going to stay on her shoulders a little bit better. Another thing with this silhouette is that they would have very full skirts and they would have these things called, I believe you pronounce it, panniers underneath. And so they would widen the hips out this way so that your hips looked wider out to the sides, not in the back or all the way around like the cage crinolines of the next century, but just out to the sides. So of course I'm not going to make that for my niece to wear under her dress, but one of the ways that I think I can achieve that kind of silhouette is by adding side panels that loop up and have extra gathers, and so that adds that volume on the sides. There were some dresses when I was looking at artwork from the 1740s that had pieces on the sides like that, so I think that that is also relatively accurate to the time period. Sleeves also were not super short like you'll see on Belle's gowns in the movies. They actually typically were close to elbow length and then they would have a wide flare on the end. The skirt was attached to the bodice. It was 2 separate pieces and the skirt was very fully gathered, of course, to accommodate the pannier underneath. And so those are the major things that I noticed. So I went digging in my patterns to see what I had, and I came up with 3 different patterns. I have this McCall's pattern. As you can see, it has the bodice with the skirt attached. It has the sleeves with the flares. Some of these look somewhat similar to the 1740s photos that you'll pull up. Obviously this is a very costume version of it, but it does look somewhat similar in general. I also found this McCall's, which I like even better because it actually has these pieces that I already want to add to the sides right here. And then it has the flares on the sleeve. It has the square neckline that I'm looking for. So I'm really leaning toward using this pattern almost completely as is, but I'll show you the other pattern I had pulled. I pulled this. This is a little girl's dress that I actually used to make another one of my niece's flower girl dresses for my own wedding. And I originally pulled it because I thought the neckline might be a little bit better But if you look, it either has the round neckline or it has the straps, and I don't want either one of those types of necklines. The bodice is essentially the same as the other bodice that I'm looking at. The skirt, general skirt pattern is essentially the same. So I really don't think I'm going to use anything from this pattern. I think I'm really going to stick with this pattern. In particular, one thing that I really like on this other pattern is how the sleeves are. It has like the lace that's gathered, as opposed, this one also has it, as opposed to just being circle cut and flaring. And I think that this more accurately depicts what I'm seeing in the photos of the era. So I think that I'm going to probably copy this idea right here, but I'm not going to give a different color here in the middle. I'm going to use this pattern instead and use the same color all the way through. This, instead of using two colors, I'll use all the same fabric for this. Here is the fabric that I've chosen. This is a yellow polyester satin, and then this is actually just some scraps that I had in my scrap bin, a red satin that I used to make my sister a dress years ago. And so I'm going to use that to make the roses. I will add roses to the pattern by using this red satin, which is something that neither of the patterns has that I'm going to be actually using pieces from, but this actually has the roses. I'll be using this pattern to help me make the roses, and then I will probably add them decoratively around the neckline, and possibly, I thought about possibly putting them coming down the front, but I have to decide on that. All right, so I decided to mostly go with this pattern, McCall's 5731. I've already made this one before, and I'm not in love with the way the skirt is. It's super full. And so I decided to use this one instead. Of course, I like the sleeves better on this one. But this one doesn't come with the peplum, which I could have drafted myself, but in the interest of time and because I'm not selling this, I'm just going to piece together some pieces. So I took this piece out of this pattern to use. The other thing I wanted to show you guys is how to make a costume that'll grow with your child. And so you're looking at the back bodice piece right now. And if you add, I'm going to add about 2 inches right here and on each side. And then what I'm going to do is, instead of putting in a zipper right along here, I'm going to run eyelets and lacing so that it will lace up tight right now. And then as she gets bigger, you can let the lacing out. She's also tall for her age. And so I'm going to cut the length on a length 5 over there on the skirt instead of a length 3, just to be able to give her a little bit more growing room in it. So I am making progress. You can see the square neckline. I went back and looked at photos of extant dresses, and the reason that it looks like a square neckline is because a lot of times actually it was an open robe that went over a piece in the middle, which sadly I don't know the technical name for. The 1700s is not my area of expertise, so this is a new journey for me. And I'm just trying to make it generally look like it, not necessarily follow construction techniques and all of those things. So the next step is I'm going to insert the sleeves, and I am going to put a ruffle on the bottom. I have a box of vintage laces and trims that I got from a lady a while ago on Marketplace, and I found this in there, so I'm going to gather that and put it on the bottom. However, it has some spots on it, so I'm going to have to wash it in order to get it ready to put on. So I'm going to have to take a break for a minute from that. I wanted to show you guys how the back works. So as you can see, the extensions on the back, and I just lined the back edge. And then what I'll do is, instead of actually putting eyelets, because eyelets don't always wear the best, I'll do buttonholes somewhere along in here about where the zipper normally would have run, and then I'll run ribbon up it, and then it can be pulled as tight or as loose as it needs to fit her, as long as she can wear it. The front, you could also do the same thing with this front piece. You could have moved the front piece slightly further from the fold, and then the pattern actually shows you how to sew the ribbons in the seams, and you could make them where it just, you know, pulled up. You could sew little loopies instead of actually sewing the ribbons in there and pull it up. But I wasn't concerned about that because, as I mentioned before, she tends to grow out of it height-wise than width-wise. And so I was more concerned about just giving a little bit of room for expansion and making it a little bit on the long side. So I'm getting the peplums ready to attach to the skirt. I found this vintage trim in my vintage trim box that has the little red roses on it. So I thought that was a perfect way to trim it. I had found this picture when I was looking at 1740s artwork. And I noticed how it had red and white trim on the yellow gown. So I thought that this was a fun detail to copy from that. And I had just enough to edge the edges of the peplum. If I had a little more, I would have done the hem, but I didn't have enough, so that'll be okay. And then I'm going to do some red roses on the bodice, so that'll tie it all together. So remember, the whole reason I'm doing the peplums is to add that width at the sides, which was part of the 1740s silhouette. And so I also added some tulle underneath in order to give it some extra poof. So I just dug around in my tulle rolls. I had a roll of yellow tulle, and then what I did was I cut, this is the length for the next piece, I cut a length that was 4 times what I needed for the peplum. And then I just folded it 4 times, and then when I pinned it to this, and then when I ran the basting thread, I ran it through all 5 layers, the 4 layers of tulle and the peplum fabric, and then just pulled it up together. Once I get the skirt constructed, then I will of course pin this on top and baste it in place before I attach everything to the bodice. Alright, so I wanted to show you guys how the Grow With Me feature on this dress works. So I ended up actually cutting off the extra right here and only leaving about a 1/2 inch extra, but I left the 2 inches right here. And then you run your buttonholes about a 1/2 inch from this side and about 2 inches on this side. And then you run your ribbon through. You just use a safety pin to help you get through the buttonholes. And then, as you can see, I can pull it up tighter, or I can loosen it out even more to give her more growing room. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey as I made a Belle costume that tried to achieve a somewhat historically accurate silhouette. Hopefully you have learned some things from this video about how to make a child's costume somewhat historically accurate in the silhouette, and also some other tips on making children's costumes, or even on pattern hacking and combining multiple patterns together to create the look that you're looking for. Please check out my other videos. I have multiple videos on how to create costumes from patterns that have an accurate fit and that have the look that you're wanting. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And also you can find me on social media, both Facebook and Instagram at Stitchin' Addiction. I also currently have a sample sale going on in my Etsy shop, so if you're looking for Halloween costumes or Christmas gifts, please check that out using the link below, and I'll see you next time.